Our Today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, verse number 20. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cha Eva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Nasht Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam Mukta Sangasya Jayate Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam Mukta Sangasya Jayate. Synonyms. Evam, thus, prasanna, enlivened, manasa, the mind, Bhagavad Bhakti, devotional service of the Lord, Yogataha, by contact of, Bhagavad, regarding the personality of Godhead, Tattva, knowledge, Vijnanam, scientific, Mukta, liberated, Sangasya, of the association, Jayati, becomes effective. Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. I'll read it again. Thus established in the mode of good unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. Purport again by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In Bhagavad Gita 7.3, it is said that out of many thousands of ordinary men, one fortunate man endeavors for perfection in life. Mostly, men are conducted by the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus they are engaged always in lust, desires, hankering, ignorance, and sleep. Out of many such man like animals is actually a man who knows the responsibility of human life and thus tries to make life perfect by following the prescribed duties. And out of many thousands of such persons who have thus attained success in human life, one may know scientifically about the personality of God at Sri Krishna. In the same Bhagavad Gita 18.55, it is also said that scientific knowledge of Sri Krishna is understood only by the process of devotional service. The very same thing is confirmed herein in the above words. No ordinary man, or even one who has attained success in human life, can know scientifically or perfectly the personality of Godhead. Perfection of human life is attained when one can understand that he is not the product of matter, but is in fact a spirit. And as soon as one understands that he has nothing to do with matter, he at once ceases his material hankerings. and becomes enlivened as a spiritual being. This attainment of success is possible when one is above the modes of passion and ignorance. Or, in other words, when one is actually a Brahmin by qualification, a Brahmin is a symbol of Sattva or the modes of goodness, and others who are not in the mode of goodness are either Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, Sudras, or less than Sudras. The Brahminical stage is the highest stage of human life because of its good qualities. So, one cannot be a devotee unless one at least qualifies as a Brahmin. The devotee is already a Brahmin by action, but that is not the end of it. As referred to above, such a Brahmin has to become a Vaishnava, in fact, to be actually in the transcendental stage. A pure Vaishnava is a liberated soul. A pure Vaishnava is a liberated soul and is transcendental even to the position of a Brahman. In the material stage, even a Brahmin is also a conditioned soul because although in the Brahmanical stage, the conception of Brahman or transcendence is realized, scientific knowledge of the Supreme Lord is lacking. One has to surpass the Brahmanical stage and reach the Vasudev stage to understand the personality of Godhead Krishna. The science of the personality of Godhead is the subject matter for study by the postgraduate students in the spiritual line. Foolish men or men with poor fund of knowledge do not understand the supreme personality of Godhead, Krishna. The science of the personality of Godhead is the subject matter for the study by the is a foolish man or man with a poor fund of knowledge do not understand Supreme Lord, and they interpret Krishna according to their respective whims. The fact is, however, that one cannot understand the science of personality of Godhead unless one is freed from the contamination of the material modes, even up to the stage of Brahman. Brahman. When a qualified Brahmin factually becomes a Vaishnava in the enlivened state of liberation, he can know what is actually the personality of Godhead. Hmm. Om Jnanam Timirindasya Jnananjanashalakaya चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदां सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरि प्रिये वंशाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. एवं प्रसन्न मनसो भगवद भक्ति योगतः भगवत तत्व विज्ञानम मुक्त संगस्य जायते. So Srimad Bhagavatam is promising to reveal the personality of Godhead, but there's a condition. There's a condition that who will it be revealed to? And that condition is very nicely elaborated in this particular verse. So, what is the condition? Established in the mode of unalloyed goodness. Those who are in unalloyed goodness, then when they come in contact with the devotional service to the Lord, they will be able to gain the insight into personality of Godhead, and by that time they would have been above the stage of liberation from all the material contamination. And in the opening line of the purport, Srila Prabhupada has quoted this verse 7.3. Manushyanam sahasresu kaschit yatati siddhaye yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tattvataha. Now, thousands among men, one may endeavor for perfection, and of those who have achieved perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. Krishna himself is saying in Bhagavad Gita that knowing him is almost impossible. Is almost impossible. It's beyond the um senses. Now, the soul, which is actually eternal, which is which is actually above the impact of material elements. Fire cannot burn the soul, air cannot dry the soul, water cannot moisten the soul. Soul is immutable, soul is insoluble, soul is eternal, soul is happy forever. So, such beautiful qualities of soul, which is so amazing, are described by Lord Krishna in Srimad Bhagavatam. But by the contamination of the material nature, what are these contaminations? What is it that gets contaminated? The contamination is happening by coming in touch with mode of passion and mode of ignorance. Mode of passion and mode of ignorance. And this mode of passion give rise to something called as lust. And Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in purport, if you see, lust. And what does that do? That changes the desire of the eternal soul of serving his supreme, lovable object, Lord Shri Krishna, and his eternal associates. That desire changes to serving my own, my own senses, mistakenly taking as myself in this body. This is what soul does by the illusory energy, illusory potency of the Supreme Lord. And that develops hankering because this lust cannot be satisfied. It is insatiable. By nature, it is insatiable. And then, therefore, a person lives in ignorance and continue to go birth after birth in different species of life. But then we have to see, we have to understand these modes of material nature. And when we were studying through Srimad Bhagavad Gita, we saw how these material modes of nature are always competing with each other. Um, Sometimes mode of goodness takes prominence, sometimes ignorance takes prominence, and sometimes mode of passion takes prominence and subdues goodness and ignorance. In this way, these modes of material nature are constantly working on the soul so that soul is continually engaged by the impact and effect of these material modes of nature. Now, it is also described what are the impact and how do you implicate it by these modes of nature. For example, it is said that mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings. So there is no end to these desires. They are as endless or as limitless as the waves in the ocean. And one can go on um, trying to fulfill them, but there's no end to it. And similarly, we see that mode of ignorance, it dilutes the embodied living entities, and as a result, they are in the state of madness or sleepiness or indolence. So there's no question of spiritual awareness when somebody is implicated by mode of passion or mode of ignorance. In mode of passion, the desires are going to keep the person very busy in trying to fulfill the objective of entertaining the senses, the mind, the body, and and therefore there's no question of somebody able to focus, take away the focus from immediate sense gratification, although he's not able to, although he's miserable, but doesn't know any other way. So he will not be able to take his focus from the immediate needs to the bigger picture, where he can see the soul and he can see how material nature is acting upon the soul. Mode of ignorance is absolutely no possibility of even enjoying the senses. What to talk about, um, you know, gaining spiritual insight. And but, however, mode of goodness is said by Krishna to be purer than all of the others, and it is eliminating. It eliminates all the senses of living beings. It eliminates, what is the elimination? The elimination of knowledge. Knowledge is light. And from then one can get rid of all the sinful reactions by being situated in mode of goodness. And what are the signs of mode of goodness? Is happiness and knowledge that comes in mode of goodness. Now, when one is situated in mode of goodness, that's when Srimad Bhagavatam is talking to us. Unless we are there, how do we even understand what is being said? And therefore, um, so important that by the association and by understanding what is mode of goodness, one is able to at least force and push and do something in order to be able to be situated in mode of goodness. So what does Bhagavatam says here? This is Canto 11, chapter 13, verse number 2. Sattva dharma bhaved vridhat pumso mada bhakti lakshanah satvikopasya sattvam tato dharma pravartate. When living entity becomes strongly situated in the mode of goodness, then religious principles, please note, characterized by devotional service to me. Who is this me? Lord Krishna. When living entity becomes strongly situated in the mode of goodness, then religious principles characterized by devotional service to me become prominent. One can strengthen the mode of goodness by cultivation of those things that are already situated in goodness, and thus religious principles arise. So we can see how the Sataguna can be obtained. It can be obtained by associating with those people, activities, situations which are already in goodness. And that by that association, one can be situated in mode of goodness. And one is situated in mode of goodness, in their heart, religious principles will awaken. And that awakening will happen by what is the lakshan? By having a desire to perform devotional service to the Supreme Lord. He says, characterized by devotional service unto me. Now, I heard Srila Prabhupada was saying one time that by practice, one can walk. A little child, he can walk by practice. But then he says, but it's not just the practice alone. It's not that because the child is practicing, therefore he's able to walk. He is able to walk. Yes, practice is required, but because the walking ability is already present in him. He doesn't have to acquire it from somewhere. It's there in him. And as he practices, he can just walk because that's the innate quality of human being. They are able to walk. It's there. Similarly, devotional service has not to be acquired. Rather, it's dormantly sitting in the heart of living entity. All he has to do through the practice is awaken that, awaken that devotional um, devotion, awaken that devotion to the Supreme Lord, which is dormant in the heart. And by that awakening, one would be able to perform uh, the devotional service. So, and how would that be facilitated? Material nature is facilitating all the activities of living entity. And the agent of the facilitation of spiritual life from the material activity is mode of goodness. So, because living entity has this blunt senses, and therefore it's very, very difficult for the soul, which is embodied, to be able to perform devotional service or uh, to come in the situation of goodness and beyond goodness. Beyond goodness, we'll discuss that in a little while, which is called Vishuddha Sattva. We go beyond the material nature, beyond the influences of material nature. But mode of goodness is also binding us in the material world because it is a part of material nature. So one is situated in mode of goodness, but do not develop devotional service. Then he will be binded by mode of goodness and still stay in the material world. Now look at this, which is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, words from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which clearly states that how by devotional service one's senses can be completely purified. Swayame Visfurati Adaha Atah Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Gayam Indriya Sevan Mukhe Hi Jivadya Swayame Vispurati Yadha. No one can understand the transcendental nature of the name, form, quality, and pastimes of Krishna, Sri Krishna, through his materially contaminated senses. The senses, which are implicated by mode of passion and mode of ignorance, cannot understand the transcendental nature of Lord Krishna. Only when one becomes spiritually saturated by transcendental service to the Lord are the transcendental name, form, quality, pastimes of the Lord revealed to him. And what does it mean, spiritually saturated? Which means there is nothing else in that soul. There is no other desire. They're spiritually saturated. They're so full. Their spiritual bliss is oozing out of them because of the fulfillment of their mind with the devotional desires. So there is no other desire. Anabhilashita shunyam dhyana karma anavritam. There is no other desire in their mind, in their heart. They are spiritually saturated by transcendental service to the Lord. Then they can understand the name, form, quality, and pastimes of the Lord. How that is understood? Krishna says, I'll reveal it to them. Just like in the darkness, if you want the sunshine, it is not possible. But in the morning, the sun comes out automatically and the darkness is dissipated. Swam ev, by its own. Right? So now Krishna further says, he says, one can understand me as I am, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These words are consistent across the scriptures said by different people, including Krishna. There's no there's no misalignment anywhere. Krishna, what he said in previous chapters, what is devotee saying in Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna is saying here also. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavam yaschashmi tattvataha tato matastato gyatva vishite tadanantaram. One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me, by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. There's no other way but the devotional service of the Lord. And how do you attain this devotional service? That is also answered. That is also answered by Krishna in Canto 7, chapter 5, and verse 32. This is a verse which Srila Prabhupada in his commentary has quoted. So I found this out. It is saying, unless they smear upon their bodies the dust of the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, completely freed from material contamination. Srila Prabhupada elaborated in his purport about a Brahmin. A Brahminical quality is the part of Chatur Varnam Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagata. And the one in ashram are the part of this material social system which facilitates one to grow into their spiritual life. So this one, this Brahman is a Vaishnava, is a part of the of that system. But Vaishnavas are beyond. They're freed from material contaminations. Persons, they are very much inclined towards, okay, then this sloka I'm reading again. Persons very much inclined towards materialistic life cannot be attached to the lotus feet of the Lord because their minds are not saturated by the desires to serve Lord. The minds are saturated otherwise, always thinking about money, women, all kinds of entertainment, anything that is related to the body and the facilities of the body, the car, the house, the this, the that, anything and everything that is temporary and would be left behind when the soul dies. That is what it is. And if the lives are attached to the matter like that, this is all matter ultimately. Even the body is matter which will be left behind. So if the life is, if materialistic life, if somebody is so inclined towards it, then they cannot be attached to the lotus feet of the Lord, who is glorified for his uncommon activities. Only by becoming Krishna conscious and taking shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, in this way, one can be freed from material contamination. Now, in the previous uh, verse, in this verse, we see how do you get free from material contamination? By taking the shelter of a Vaishnava who is already free from the material contaminations. Now, we see that um, how this devotional service is powerful because see material liberation means what uh, it means that you become beyond the material modes of nature. What is that verse? mm, it'll just come to me meanwhile. So the point is that one feels happy by the when he gets liberated from the effect of material modes of nature, but there is nothing beyond it. Whereas devotional service starts when one is freed from the material modes of nature, one is situated into the mode Suddha Sattva, beyond mode of goodness. And it starts from there. So Prabhupada says that liberation has already occurred for someone who's performing devotional service. Because for a person who is liberated, there's nothing beyond liberation. He's happily situated in his liberated condition, but then what is beyond? Whereas devotee or a Vaishnav, he has a service. And that service forms a relationship between the servitor and the one who is serviced. This way, there is more than one person. There's Supreme Lord and there's a soul. And between them two, there's a transcendental reciprocation of loving reciprocation of the service. So this service, even after liberation, continue on and becomes intensified and so much intensified that in that service, one finds their relationship with the God as in Sakhiras, in Dasaras, or in conjugal ras, which is your, or in parental love, Vatsalya ras, or Madhurya ras, conjugal Madhurya ras, Parakya bhav, Vipralambha bhav. There's so much and more that cannot be imagined, and that arises by devotional service. And that devotional service is beyond these kind of muktis which are sayujya mukti. Hmm? One goes and merges with the Supreme Lord. So that is given to enemies. So Prabhupada says, why would Krishna not give something more to his devotees? He gives to his devotees. It says here his constant Krishna's devotees attain association of the Lord as his constant companions, either in Vrindavan or Vaikuntha planets. Similarly, although Narad Muni wanders in the three world, he has exalted devotion for Narayan as Sharaman. Hmm? So we see this. Now, I wanted to go through the pastimes of Chitraketu, but I think that's not possible in the limited time. Maybe some other day we can again catch up on that. But there was a shloka which was recited. Let me just see, by Lord Shiva when Chitraketu accepts the curse upon him by Mother Parvati. Lord Shiva says these wonderful words. I really wanted to set the context of this particular pastime, but we do not have time. So I'll just read these verses, which are giving us very deep insight into the heart of a Vaishnava. And who is saying this? Who is the Param Vaishnava? Who is the Supreme Vaishnava? Vaishnavamya Tathashambhu. He's saying these words to Mother Sita. She's material energy of the Lord. So we have to understand how powerful these words are. And we can just put faith in these words. Shri Rudra Uvacha Dastvati Shroni Hare Radbhut Karmanaha Mahatmyam Bhritya Bhrityanam Nisprahanam Mahatmanam. Lord Shiva said, my dear beautiful Parvati, you have seen the greatness of the Vaishnavas, being servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. They are great souls and are not interested in any kind of material happiness. Chit Ketu was flying. Um, he has already obtained darshan of Lord Krishna by that time, and he has become a pure devotee of the Lord. So when this curse was given to him, that he will have to take the birth of a demon in his next life, he just accepted it. And what did Lord Shiva says? He says, Narayan paraha sarve na kushchana bhibhyati swargapavarga narkeshu api tulyartha darshinaha api tulyartha darshina. He's saying that even heavenly planets in liberation and hellish planets, everything is same for a pure devotee of the Lord, because they're only interested in the service of the Lord. They're not interested in anything else. Devotees solely engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, never fear any condition of life. For them, heavenly planets, liberation, and hellish planets are all the same. Swarg, Apavarg, Narkeshu, everything is same for them. Eh? They are not interested in anything else but the service of the Lord. Now, this is a very powerful statement, that this is how Vaishnavas are and conducts themselves. They are, look, it says here, they do not care wherever they are, heaven or hell, they are engaged in the service of the Lord. This is the excellence. Anukulena Krishna Anushilanam, liberally engaged in the service of the Lord, and therefore they are excellent. By using the word Bhritya Bhrityanam, Lord Shiva pointed out that although Chitketu provided one example of tolerance and excellence, all the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord as eternal servants are glorious. Mhm. So we can see from these examples that how perhaps we can to um, try to make our lives very successful. And how do we make our life successful? So that whole process is discussed here today in this particular verse. Uh, so for devotees, it is important that wherever they are, whether they are situated in London or they are situated in some other city of United Kingdom, or they are situated in any other part of the world, be it Europe or Asia, India, wherever they are, actually, they should only be bothered about one thing: where is the service which is pleasing to the Lord? Because anything else, if they want to change their circumstances, they want to change their situations, they want to change their whatever they want to change, they may change it. But if they do not obtain service of the Lord and service of the devotees, then everything else will be as big zero. All the endeavor will be only an endeavor. Shram matra hi kevalam. It will not result into anything which is eternal. So it's a big lesson. It's a deep realization. It's a subject of introspection. Whenever mind is unable to tolerate the situations of life, whenever we are pushed by the modes of material nature, specifically passion, ignorance, devotees look back, they step back, they don't go into that emotions, they don't flow into the waves of river of material nature. They step back and they see, okay, the solution of all the problem is engagement in the service of the Lord. And how am I going to get it in this situation? If I can be engaged in the service of the Lord in these difficult situations, Krishna will be pleased. And obviously, the ties of the material nature, and the knots in the heart, they will be released and will be relieved of all the pain which is arising due to attachment by releasing of those knots of devotional service can do that. It can please the Lord, which can in turn release us from the clutches of Maya, and we can be happily situated eternally in the lotus feet of Vasudeva. So now, with this, we close our discussion. If there are any questions and if there are any comments, we can take that.
Hare
Hare
Krishna, Prabhuji.
Krishna. Okay, sorry.
No, go on, Mataji.
No, please, you go ahead, please. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Thanks, Prabhuji, for a wonderful class, and you have connected very well. I was actually about to ask the question, how do we get the devotion service? Before I ask, you answered everything, the step by step. Thanks for that. I think one of the point maybe I misunderstood. You mentioned that mode of ignorance, there is no chance of having a sense enjoyment.
Yes, sir. So in mode of ignorance, the example of mode of ignorance is sleep. Hmm? In the state of sleep, you are sleeping. But in that state of sleep, you're not able to feel anything. But it's only after that when you awake, that is mode of passion. You are able to feel the impact. Ah, sleep was nice. But and the time when you're sleeping, you could not much gauge it. Similarly, when somebody is in the state of, let's say, somebody has drunk a lot of alcohol and they're lying on the floor, there's no enjoyment that is felt. But later on, he may remember something. Ah, it was nice. It was this. It was that. So this mode of ignorance actually takes one to the state of not being conscious. It takes one to the complete darkness. And that is what I meant by a few examples. But there could be some example where you can feel some enjoyment. But ultimately, it's more of passion which drives sense of enjoyment. That's the driver. So there can be some aspects of, goodness and ignorance, but that's the one which drives the sense enjoyment. As much as mode of goodness drives the senses illumination, to that extent, mode of ignorance drives complete sense subduing, so to say. This is what happens with the modes. I hope I made it clear.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. Note pronounced. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Manu Prabhu. Such an excellent class. I really was so much absorbed just by hearing, and you gave such a elaborated way the whole the verse, what I understood that actually this verse, the way you explain is it's like a barometer. It can actually it's kind of a it will help us to feel or to see where we are at the moment in our devotional service or into Krishna consciousness. And I mean, the perfect example is that those two little girls today, they're so young, they decided so well, they listened to their mother, how she recorded, and this is where the mode of goodness started. It's so wonderful. Everything just in this class, I found it so amazing the way you are just connecting all the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam and bringing Krishna consciousness so near to our heart. I'm really grateful to you. Wonderful, wonderful class. Thank you so much.
Welcome, Mataji. I've simply repeated the logics and presentations of Srila Prabhupada as it is. Didn't try to put my own head into it. And therefore, you're feeling such bliss inside your heart because it is Srila Prabhupada's words. So,
Yeah, but you put it very, very nicely. We are very grateful. We are all very grateful. Thank you so much.
okay, dear devotees, if there is no other question or comment, maybe take leave and then we meet next week again. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu
Patitanam
पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः
नमः
Hare Krishna, Hare
Hare
हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे
Hare
हरे
Hare
हरे
Hare
राम
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
हरे
Hare
राम
Rama,
राम
Rama
राम
Rama,
हरे
Hare
हरे
Hare.
Thank you,
Srimad Bhagavatam ki
Prabhuji.
jai.
Jai
Shri
Jai.
Tat
जय
Ki Jai.
जय
Thank
Jai.
you, Prabhuji. Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna,
Krishna.
everyone.
Namaste.
Hare Krishna.